So, imagine this for a whole decade. My brother William and his wife Tanya shut me out of every family holiday, calling me too negative because of my grief. Yeah, 10 years. And while they were living it up, I quietly rebuilt my life, and in a way they'd never expect. I'm talking a luxury mountain estate, complete privacy, the whole dream. But now, suddenly, they want the keys. Wait until you hear what happens next, because this story, it gets messy and honestly, a little satisfying. I remember it like it was yesterday. I'd been in the hospital for 4 days, recovering from pneumonia that had nearly turned into sepsis. My chest felt like it was stuffed with broken glass every time I breathed, and even lifting a spoon of gelatin felt like running a marathon. I was weak, scared, just waiting for someone to walk through the door. Someone to check in. My phone buzzed on the tray table and I reached for it, my hand trembling slightly from the IV in my arm. I was expecting a message from William. Maybe a quick "get well soon," or even a promise to come see me. I texted him 2 days ago to let him know I'd been admitted. I was hoping, just hoping, that he'd say something, anything. But instead, it was a notification from Instagram, from Tanya, and I tapped it, thinking, maybe it's a cute picture of the dog. Right. Something harmless. But then it loaded, and the air just left my lungs, harder than any cough or wheeze I'd had all week. It was a group selfie, high resolution, perfectly filtered. William, Tanya, the kids Aaron and Serenity all posed in front of an airport gate. William's grinning, arm wrapped around Tanya, who's wearing this oversized white faux fur coat and sunglasses that made her look, I don't know, untouchable, distant. The kids were looking effortlessly cool, like nothing in the world could touch them. And the caption read, "Finally escaping the gloom. Annual family ski trip begins now. Sending good vibes only. Family first. Good energy? Zurich bound. Family first." I stared at that, my heart sinking, stomach dropping. I checked the timestamp, posted 10 minutes ago. I scrolled back through my messages with William. My text, sent 2 days ago. "Hey Will, just letting you know I'm at St. Mary's with pneumonia. Doctors say I'll be okay, but it's rough." He'd read it. He knew I was alone in a hospital bed, struggling for every breath, and his response wasn't a call, not a visit, not even a text checking in. Nope. He packed up, rounded up Tanya and the kids, and jetted off to Switzerland. And here's the thing, it wasn't just the trip. It was the timing, the absolute callousness of it. While I was literally fighting for oxygen, they were sipping hot cocoa in the Alps and posting about good energy. I dropped my phone onto the hospital sheets, the plastic thudding dully against the bed, and the tears came. Hot, stinging tears pricking my eyes, but I couldn't even wipe them away. I just stared, and staring, it made me see something I hadn't fully admitted to myself. They didn't care. Not really. The people who were supposed to be my family, my support, they didn't even notice I was struggling. And that, I think, is when something inside me shifted. Not a sudden flash of anger, not even hatred. It was quieter, almost eerie, like a tether snapped inside me. The tether that had bound me to them, that desperate hope that one day they'd see me, welcome me back, realize I mattered. "Snapped," I whispered, barely audible in the empty hospital room. "Family first." And it didn't sound like love. It sounded like a lie. And right then, I knew I wasn't the broken little sister anymore. not the one who waited, hoping they'd care. They had their family first, their image, their vacations, their good vibes. And I was about to start something they'd never see coming. After I got discharged, the next weeks were kind of a blur. Physical therapy, slow recovery, a lot of sitting quietly and thinking. Watching their trip unfold on social media was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. Tanya posting reels of fondue, ski slopes, après-ski parties. Serenity, my 16-year-old niece, posting TikToks about the Wi-Fi in the chalet and mocking the old folks on the slopes. Aaron, 20, supposedly in college, just showing off bottles of vodka in clubs. And William barely a post, just lurking in the background, looking stressed. I knew that look. It's the one of a man checking his credit card balance every hour. And suddenly, all that vacation gloss felt fake and desperate. Weeks later, when they returned, I got a single text from William. "Hey, saw you're out of the hospital. Glad you're good. Trip was crazy. We're exhausted. Let's catch up next month. Next month. Not can I come over, need anything, not sorry I missed you. Just let's pretend I exist, and maybe we'll talk in 30 days. And that, I think, was the final confirmation. The person I hoped would notice me, who should have cared, didn't. And you know, at first it crushed me, really crushed me. But then, slowly, a strange kind of clarity emerged. They weren't just being thoughtless, they underestimated me. They thought I was stuck in that vulnerable hospital bed, small and powerless. And here's the weird part, they were about to learn that I wasn't stuck, I wasn't powerless. And I was about to take control of my life in a way that would leave them speechless. And it all started with that one Instagram post. A casual little snapshot that hit me like a punch. That moment, it was heartbreaking. Yeah, but it was also the beginning of something else. Something stronger. Something quiet. Something that would change everything. I just didn't know how yet. After leaving the hospital, the first thing I did was go back to my apartment, a modest, tidy place that William had always dismissed with a sniff. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, I felt a tiny spark of control, of quiet power. The first week was rough, obviously. My lungs were still weak. Every breath a little laborious, every movement a reminder of how close I'd been to the edge. I spent long hours just sitting, thinking, letting the world outside my apartment continue without me. Because honestly, I didn't care what they were doing. I was exhausted, yes, but also plotting in the calmest sense of the word. I mean, I wasn't scheming or anything shady. I was just planning my life. Planning it for me, not for anyone else's approval or expectations. And while I reflected on the betrayal, the exclusion, the sheer callousness of my family, I realized something vital. They had no idea who I was anymore. Or, more accurately, who I had become while they were busy judging me. While William and Tanya were posting pictures of ski trips, I'd been quietly building a life they didn't even know existed. They thought I was scraping by, stuck in some middle-of-the-road IT support job, maybe barely covering rent, living quietly and in their minds, miserably. But that wasn't me. Not at all. For the past 5 years, I'd been working as a senior software architect, specializing in high-frequency trading platforms, 80-hour weeks, consulting for major fintech firms, earning more than enough to live anywhere I wanted. And I did I just hadn't needed to flaunt it because, well, why would I? Their ignorance, their assumptions, it made me invisible, but in a way that was empowering. I was untouchable in the life I'd built, and it was mine, entirely. I remember the first night I sat down with my laptop. 3 monitors glowing softly in the dim apartment light. I pulled up a real estate listing I'd been eyeing for 6 months the awry, 3 hours north, deep in the mountains, no tourist traps, no condos for Instagram show-offs, just pure, private, untamed nature. 20 acres of forest, backing right up to a national park. An A-frame house, modern timber and glass, floor-to-ceiling windows framing a private lake and distant peaks. Heated wraparound deck, chef's kitchen, sauna, and a detached guest house. The listing price would have made William choke on his scotch if he'd ever known. But I did. And more than just knowing I was ready. I had toured the place privately just before I got sick, falling in love with the silence, the way the snow dusted the pines, the stone fireplace roaring even in photos, the total absence of cell service unless you stood in that one. Very specific spot, no clubs, no people, no judgment, perfect. I picked up the phone and called Sarah, the realtor, who sounded genuinely surprised to hear from me. "Mila," she said, "I heard you were unwell." "Recovering," I said, my voice steadier than I'd felt in weeks. And then I asked, almost casually, "Is the area still available?" There was a pause. "It is," she said. "But there's another offer coming. They want to subdivide the land. I'm buying it," I said, a small smile tugging at my lips. I could hear her shifting into professional mode, ready to talk financing, contingencies, logistics. "Wait, cash or mortgage?" she asked. "Cash. Full ask. I can wire the deposit today and close as soon as the title work is done." Silence. Long, tense silence. "Cash. Ma. That's significant. I want the keys by the end of the month," I said, and I added, "just to make sure, and I want this transaction completely private. No social media posts, no signs, nothing." I hung up and leaned back, closing my eyes, picturing myself on that heated deck, coffee in hand, sunrise over the mountains, the quiet stretching for miles. Just me. No bad energy, no expectations. It was intoxicating, this sense of control, of absolute ownership over my life, my environment, my peace. And then the thought struck me, oh, William would lose his mind if he knew. He loved the mountains, dreamed of a winter getaway. He fancied himself a skier. But let's be honest, he spent more time in the lodge bar than on the runs. And he certainly didn't have the capital. If he knew I had just bought this place, he would see it as a family asset he had some claim to, rather than my sanctuary. I smiled, a slow, private smile. Because here's the thing, they thought they could write me off, exclude me, call me negative, think I was fragile, still grieving. And meanwhile, I was standing on a foundation of quiet, undeniable success, building a life entirely on my own terms. I thought back to the weeks in the hospital, the Instagram post, the hollow ache in my chest. I remembered how small and powerless I had felt then, and the contrast now, it was staggering. I wasn't small anymore. I wasn't powerless. I was thriving. And I could finally see clearly all those years of exclusion, of being pushed aside, of being told I was too much of a burden or too negative it hadn't broken me. It had, in a twisted way, prepared me for this moment. For the first time in a long time, I felt like the author of my own story, and no one else had a say. Every detail of the airy, every dollar I had earned in those long, grueling years, every careful investment, every night spent coding while the world slept, it all led to this, my sanctuary, my victory, my proof that I could rise above their assumptions. And yeah, I was excited, thrilled, even, but not in a flashy bragging way. It was a quiet, almost smug satisfaction. The kind you get when the world thinks you're down and you've quietly built yourself an empire while they were busy judging you. Sitting there, picturing myself sipping morning coffee while snowflakes drifted lazily past the windows. I felt a kind of peace that was unfamiliar but intoxicating. No one could touch this. No one could take it away. And best of all, no one even knew about it yet. Not William, not Tanya, not the rest of the family. For once, I wasn't invisible in the way they thought they were invisible to me. And it felt incredible. Over the years, the exclusion had become almost routine. It wasn't always loud or dramatic. Most of the time, it was subtle, insidious. My birthday invites that conveniently left me off the list. Family emails where my presence was assumed to be optional, or little comments Tanya would make loud enough for me to hear. Like, Mila's just draining. She brings the vibe down. And William, he'd parrot it without even realizing he was doing it. Like he'd swallowed her script whole. At first, it hurt. It hurt a lot. You don't realize how much you crave approval until it's systematically denied. I remember the holiday cards each year. I'd see their perfectly filtered smiles, the kids laughing, and I wasn't there. Not because they forgot, but because they decided I didn't fit the picture. They'd frame it as concern. You know, we're trying to manifest abundance. Mila's just radiating lack. And they believed it, or at least, they wanted everyone else to believe it, and that's what stung the most. They didn't just leave me out, they controlled the narrative. I became the negative one, the one with bad energy, the one who needed to fix herself before she could even be near the kids. They turned a family relationship into a story where I was the problem. Meanwhile, they handled everything else: our parents' estate, the funerals, the legacy of grief. And here's the thing, they didn't do it wrong out of malice. Well, maybe a little, but mostly because William didn't have the emotional bandwidth, and Tanya needed a story to justify her control. I was 30, freshly divorced, raw, and stepping up to handle things they couldn't. I sorted through decades of memories, met with lawyers, cleaned out the house while William drank his dad's wine collection and complained about how unfair life was. I gave him the larger share of the inheritance, the family car for Tanya, and absorbed all the debt and paperwork myself. And through it all, I kept quiet. I didn't argue, I didn't complain. I just did what needed to be done. It was exhausting, depressing, even. And for a while, I let the narrative sting. I wondered, maybe too much, why they couldn't see me, why they couldn't acknowledge the effort, the sacrifices. But slowly, I started to see it differently. The emails arrived, little reminders of my exclusion. One from Tanya about Aaron's birthday dinner, assuming I'd want to stay home because I was recovering from the hospital. Another subtle message that said, in effect, "We know you're too sad, too weak, too low vibration to participate." And I realized they weren't just punishing me. They were building a story that suited them. They were creating a reality where I was the problem, where my feelings, my grief, my life didn't matter. And I had been buying into it, at least emotionally, for years. But 3 months after the hospital incident, when the phone rang and it was William, something clicked. The same old script, cheerful sales pitch voice, trying to pass off entitlement as concern. But I didn't need his approval anymore. I was no longer looking for permission, no longer hoping for validation from people who had spent a decade telling me I was too much, too negative, too broken. I had walls up, and they weren't going anywhere. Their exclusion had taught me something important when someone repeatedly pushes you away. Eventually, you stop knocking. Eventually. You like the distance. You embrace your own space, your own life. I had absorbed their narrative. Yeah. But now I was rewriting it for myself. And for the first time, I was seeing clearly how much power they had given me without even realizing it. They thought I was weak, easily manipulated, still haunted by past grief. But the truth was, all that distance, all that exclusion had shaped me into someone entirely different, someone capable, decisive, and independent. I didn't need their acknowledgement. I didn't need their invitations, their staged positivity, or their constant reminders that I was too negative. I had my own life, my own success, my own sanctuary, and in that moment, I finally understood how carefully they'd engineered the story about me and how completely irrelevant it had become. The emails, the invitations, the orchestrated appearances, it was all background noise. All I needed was clarity, focus, and a commitment to myself. The past, their narrative, it didn't define me anymore. And that shift, quiet and steady, set the stage for everything that came next. Because when you stop seeking approval from the people who have never really seen you, you start to see yourself. You start to understand your own worth, your own power, and what it means to finally take control of your life. The phone rang one quiet afternoon, and when I saw it was William, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it entirely, but curiosity won. I picked up. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Mila. How's my favorite sister?" His voice boomed, overly cheerful, like a sales pitch. I paused. "I'm your only sister, William," I said flatly. There was a chuckle on the other end, the kind that tries to disguise impatience as charm. "Come on, don't be like that. I'm calling with a business opportunity, something you might be interested in." I leaned back, guard up immediately. "I'm not lending you money." William, his laugh was short, dismissive. No, it's not that. The market's on fire. Just a small opportunity. We're looking for a venue for a winter retreat. High-end clients, rustic luxury, and, well, we thought of you." I felt my chest tighten. I knew what this meant. He wanted access to the area, my sanctuary. "I'm listening," I said cautiously. He continued, rattling off details about Tanya's brand launch, the need for high-frequency, high-altitude vibes, the dates, the guests, and all the while, his tone oozed entitlement, like I owed him something. I kept my voice calm. "William, I'm not house-sitting, if that's what you're implying." "Come on." "Mela," he said, slightly frustrated. "I just thought, you might have a connection. You're always out there, networking. You hear things." I swallowed, suppressing a laugh. He really thought I was some kind of secret concierge. A connection, I repeated, letting the words hang. "Family," his tone shifted, suddenly defensive. "We need this. Mila." Tanya and I are in a bit of a bind. The retreat, the clients, it's crucial. You could help? I closed my eyes briefly, picturing the Ari. The peace I'd cultivated, their desperation was obvious, but I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I let a moment pass. A pause. You know, I said finally, I have a strict policy at my place, only people with good energy. I take it very seriously. There was a brief silence. I could hear him calculating, trying to reconcile his assumptions with reality. Mila, this is serious. I'm not asking as a favor. This is an opportunity for everyone. Family included. I leaned forward, my tone measured. Family first. Right, funny. That's what you posted from Zurich while I was in the hospital. The line went quiet. I could hear him breathe. And in that quiet, I realized just how fragile the facade was. His casual entitlement had cracked. I let that silence linger a beat longer. I don't know what you're talking about, he said finally, trying to regain composure. William, I do, I said softly, but firmly. I could feel the power in the words. I wasn't angry. Not really. Just steady. Strategic. And I'm not giving you the cabin. Not for this retreat. Not for anything. There it was. The truth. Simple. Calm. And immovable. You can't be serious, he said, his tone rising slightly. We're family. We need this place. It's the only option. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. Family. You went to Zurich while I was in a hospital bed. Family doesn't act like that. And this asking me to hand over my home, my sanctuary. This isn't family. It's entitlement masked as opportunity. I could hear him start to sputter, Tanya chiming in somewhere in the background, her voice high-pitched and urgent, trying to sway me, but I didn't flinch. Every syllable I spoke was deliberate, every pause calculated. I could hear his frustration, his disbelief. He was grasping for leverage, for reasons why I should cave. But the reality I held in my mind, in my hands, was stronger than their manipulations. I let them see, without saying it outright, that I knew their game, that I knew their finances, their desperation, the cracks in their perfect online world. And I knew, too, that my calm refusal was more powerful than any shout or argument. I'm not playing games. William, I said finally, voice soft but unyielding. I'm just stating the facts. My home, my rules, good energy only. You can't come in. Silence, then a quiet, low growl from him. You're being ridiculous. I smiled faintly, not with joy, but with a controlled satisfaction. No, William, I'm being strategic and honest, something you've clearly forgotten how to be. The line went dead shortly after, but the tension lingered in the air, and I sat back, letting it settle, calm, composed, and aware that the power had shifted. They had asked. They had begged. They had tried to manipulate, and all it did was confirm one thing: I no longer needed their approval. I didn't need to explain. I didn't need to negotiate. And I certainly didn't need to give in. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting to their expectations. I was simply holding the line. And in that line, I found clarity, strength, and the quiet thrill of control. After that tense phone call, I knew I needed the full picture. I couldn't just rely on intuition or their frantic requests. I needed facts. So, I started digging. Public records, business filings, court documents, anything that would give me insight into William and Tanya's financial situation. I opened browser tabs like I was prepping for a heist, scanning county clerk records, lien notices, legal complaints, and, well, the picture that emerged was messy. There were 3 liens against William's primary residence, 1 from the IRS, 2 from private contractors, and that was just the start. I could see patterns of over-leveraging, unpaid debts, and what looked like desperate juggling of funds to stay afloat. Every click and scroll added to the story I already suspected their luxury ski trip. The high-end Instagram posts, the retreat, they were all smoke and mirrors masking a precarious financial situation. But I needed confirmation. So, I contacted a private investigator I'd used for employment background checks before. Quick, discreet, and thorough, exactly what I needed. I sent a short email. Need a full asset search on William, redacted, verified debts, pending litigation, rush job, 2-day turnaround. And then I waited. Those 2 days felt endless. I kept replaying the phone call, William's tone, Tanya's frantic interjections, imagining the wheels turning in their heads. When the report finally came, I sat down slowly, bracing myself. It was worse than I thought. Lawsuits from 2 former investors for misappropriation of funds. A dealership that was basically a parking lot for cars they couldn't sell. And Tanya's credit cards maxed out. They were living on a razor's edge, rolling one debt to pay another, masking the collapse behind social media glamour and overconfidence. And the retreat, they had already sold tickets, promising a luxury venue they couldn't possibly secure. I read the landing page carefully. Exclusive 5-day wealth manifestation retreat, private estate, $5,000 per person, only 10 spots left. The Zurich trip had been their scouting mission, a desperate move to secure a place they didn't have money for. And now they were scrambling, hoping someone like me would provide the solution. I leaned back in my chair, a faint, cold smile tugging at my lips. Well, isn't that interesting? All their frantic charm, all their pleas, they were caught. And I had the leverage. I knew their secret. I could see exactly how desperate they were. It wasn't just about being excluded from my life anymore. It was about power, about exposing their lies, their poor decisions, and their attempts to manipulate everyone around them. I could anticipate every move, every angle, because the information was clear, unambiguous, and devastating. I thought back to the hospital, the Instagram post, the dismissive text from William. This wasn't just about bad energy anymore. It was about control and truth. And for the first time, I felt the thrill of strategic advantage. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't panicking. I was methodical, calculated, patient. I started thinking about the next steps, how to use this knowledge responsibly, how to make sure they couldn't just bluff their way through, counting on their usual tactics of guilt, manipulation, and social pressure. The suspense of it all was intoxicating. Every detail in the report, every lawsuit, every unpaid contractor, every maxed card painted a clear picture of desperation. I could feel the tension building in my chest. Not from anxiety, but anticipation. Anticipation for the moment when I would confront them, calmly, strategically, with evidence they couldn't deny. I imagined their reactions, their panic, the sudden realization that the narrative they'd spun for years was finally unraveling. And in that anticipation, there was a quiet satisfaction. I wasn't acting out of malice. I was preparing to protect my home, my peace, and the truth. I knew their schemes. I knew their lies. And I knew that withholding the cabin wasn't just an act of defiance, it was an act of clarity. I could almost see it play out the moment they realized their high frequency, high altitude retreat was nothing but an illusion. And the person they assumed was powerless. The sister they dismissed held all the cards. Sitting there, staring at the evidence, I realized how far I'd come. From hospital bed to strategist, from isolated victim to empowered orchestrator. Every detail I'd uncovered strengthened my resolve. Every piece of information was a tool, a shield, a quiet weapon of truth. And in that moment, I understood something fundamental. Knowing the truth, seeing the full picture, gave me the freedom to act not recklessly, not vindictively, but decisively. Their desperation had been revealed. Their lies were laid bare, and I finally had clarity, patience, and power on my side. I could almost feel their next move, and I was ready. I decided to have a little fun before confronting them directly. I posted a single photo on my private Instagram. The account only a few close friends could see, but I knew Tanya had her little burner account, the one she used to spy. Classic move. The photo was simple, a view from the deck of the Arai, snow-capped peaks in the distance, a glass of red wine resting on the railing, and the caption, "Finally home. The air is just cleaner up here." No tags, no location, nothing that screamed luxury or bragging, just quiet satisfaction. I waited, and it didn't take long. About 45 minutes later, my phone rang. Tanya, of course. Her voice came in all chirpy, a pitch higher than usual. "Mila, oh my God, how are you?" I put her on speaker while typing away at my main screen, like I was totally busy. "I'm fine, Tanya," I said casually. There was a slight pause on her end, and then she asked, "The view, it's breathtaking. Where is that?" I let the question hang for a beat, just enough to make her think. "It's my new place," I said, trying to keep my tone as ordinary as possible. You should have heard the little gasp she made. "Your new place," she repeated, her mind clearly running in circles, trying to do the math of how the broke negative sister had suddenly bought a multi-million-dollar mountain estate. "I bought it, closed last week," I added, letting the words sink in. Dead silence. I could almost hear her gears turning audibly, calculating, recalculating, then the pivot. She tried to smooth it over with that practiced charm of hers. "Well, that's great, really great. William will be so surprised. So, since you have this huge place and it's just you, right? Because you're single? We were kind of in a bind. Big opportunity, high-end retreat. Maybe you could, help us out." I smiled faintly, a small, private smile. Oh, I knew exactly what she was doing, testing the waters, fishing for leverage, trying to turn my sanctuary into their solution. And I let her dangle there for a few seconds, all the while typing, pretending not to notice her desperation. Strategic patience, my favorite, because here's the thing. I wasn't just enjoying the moment. I was setting the stage. I had all the information, all the leverage, and watching her scramble while I stayed calm, well, that was just priceless. The morning of the retreat arrived like a snow-glittered postcard, blindingly perfect, but completely indifferent to the chaos about to unfold. I woke early, the silence of the Arai wrapping around me like a warm blanket, broken only by the crackle of the fire I'd started before dawn. I wasn't wearing my usual oversized sweater and leggings. Not today. No, today I dressed with intention, a tailored wool coat, boots, and slacks. I I wanted to look like the owner of a multi-million-dollar estate, not someone who could be bargained with. Because that was exactly the problem William and Tanya didn't understand. They had built this fantasy in their heads that I was fragile, malleable, the same weak little sister who had been left in a hospital bed months ago. They were about to discover the truth. I had called the local sheriff's department the day before, just in case. I let them know I expected a disturbance, a group of trespassers attempting to access my property under false pretenses. They agreed to have a patrol car stationed down the road, just out of sight, waiting for my signal. Every detail mattered. And then it happened. At exactly I heard the convoy long before I saw it. First, William's leased Range Rover, black and aggressive, crunching through the fresh snow. Then a Sprinter van, probably rented for the guests. And Tanya's white SUV. They slowed as they approached the massive iron gates, which, of course, remained firmly locked. My phone rang. William. I didn't answer. I let it ring. Instead, I walked out to the front door, down the heated stone steps, and stopped about 50 yards from the gate. From there, I could see them clearly. William was out of his car, frantically punching the code into the keypad. It didn't work. Tanya was waving her arms, the cheerful, high-frequency persona I knew so well, cracking under pressure. Behind them, the Sprinter doors opened, and a group of confused VIP guests spilled out. Designer ski gear, luggage, hopeful faces, the whole scene of people expecting an exclusive retreat. Now, stuck in the snow, I walked closer, stopping just 10 feet from the gate, and looked at them all. I didn't shout. I didn't look angry. I looked disappointed. Go home. William, I said, calmly. Are you insane? He hissed, gripping the bars like a caged animal. These people paid. You're humiliating us. One of the guests, a tall woman in oversized sunglasses, stepped forward. Excuse me, is there a problem with the check-in? I addressed her directly, my voice steady. Yes. The problem is this is a private residence, not a retreat center, not for rent. I have never spoken to any of you before in my life. Confusion rippled through the group. The woman turned to William, disbelief on her face. You said this was your family estate. William stammered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. She's the caretaker. She's having a breakdown. Tanya's shrill voice joined in, trying to maintain control. Family drama. Just give me a second to handle her. But I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. I pulled a manila envelope from inside my coat and held it up. This, I said, slow and deliberate, is a cease and desist order for defamation. And this, I pulled out a thicker stack of papers, is a copy of the lien filings against Prestige Auto, the bankruptcy petition you drafted but haven't filed, and proof that you've taken $50,000 from these guests for a venue you do not own. The air went still. Guests gasped audibly, stepping back, eyes wide. Some murmured, hands flying to mouths. You could see the shock registering across their faces. This wasn't a staged stunt. It wasn't a miscommunication. It was the undeniable truth hitting them like cold mountain air. William froze, his jaw tight, eyes darting between the papers and me. Tanya shrieked, rushing forward, trying to salvage control. Don't you dare ruin this for us. You jealous, bitter witch. You've always wanted to see us fail. I let her words hang for a moment before responding, my voice rising just enough to cut through her hysteria. I didn't want you to fail. I wanted honesty. But you can't do that. Not ever. Not here. William, white-faced, tried to speak, but I cut him off. You've been lying to investors. You've been selling tickets for a retreat you had no right to host. You dragged your children, your guests, your family into a lie, and now you're asking me to help you perpetuate it. Not happening. I looked past him to the back seat of the Range Rover, Aaron and Serenity. They weren't scrolling on phones, weren't checking the snow or the road. They were staring at their father, pale-faced, eyes wide with realization. They were seeing him for the first time, the man behind the curtain. Panic rippled through William's shoulders. His usual arrogance, entitlement, bravado, all gone. Every inch of his carefully constructed image had unraveled in the cold, quiet presence of the awry and in the faces of people who now knew the truth. I called the sheriff, I said softly, eyes sweeping over the group. They're 2 minutes away. If you leave now, you might still have a chance to refund these people before they press charges. But you are not coming in here. The silence was staggering. William opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. You're dead to me, he whispered finally, his voice shaking. You hear me? You have no family. I know, I replied, my tone carrying both weight and a strange calm. You made sure of that years ago. The wail of sirens cut through the crisp mountain air. William flinched, looking at the guests who were now shouting, demanding their money back, snapping photos of license plates. Tanya's mascara-streaked face, hands to her mouth, her carefully crafted persona utterly shattered. The kids, Aaron and Serenity, looked away, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. And then, finally, the Range Rover, the SUV, the Sprinter van, all turned away, tires spinning, snow spraying as they peeled out of the driveway, leaving their illusions behind and the reality of exposure in their wake. I pressed the button on the remote. The heavy iron gates swung open slowly, deliberately, and the guests looked at me with cautious curiosity. You can't stay, I said gently, but you may wait in the courtyard. The sheriff will need your statements. The tall woman, still shocked, looked from me to the retreating cars. One word escaped her. She says you were the negative one. I smiled, a small, tired smile, not triumphant, but understanding. He says a lot of things. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely public. The high-frequency retreat became a local news scandal overnight. People who had attended or attempted to attend shared statements with the sheriff, filed complaints, and documented every inconsistency. Word spread fast. Investors who had been ignored or placated for months suddenly came out of the woodwork. The IRS got involved. Within 3 months, Prestige, Auto, and Estates was dissolved, and William and Tanya filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. They lost the house, the cars, the club memberships, everything that had defined their carefully curated lives. And honestly, I didn't gloat. I watched it all unfold from the comfort of my estate, feeling a complex mix of relief, satisfaction, and even sorrow. It didn't have to be this way. But they had chosen deception and entitlement over honesty at every turn. Their downfall wasn't my doing, it was a natural consequence of the life they built on lies. Meanwhile, I had the Arai, my sanctuary, my proof that quiet determination and integrity would always triumph over manipulation and entitlement. The winter passed slowly, peacefully. The snow blanketed the forest, muffling the world and creating a cocoon of silence. I learned to chop wood, to build fires that lasted through the cold nights, and to listen to the sounds of the forest, bird calls, the rustle of trees in the wind, the occasional distant howl of a coyote. It was a language I hadn't taken the time to understand before. Silence wasn't empty here. It was full, rich, and healing. Then, one March afternoon, as the snow began to melt, my gate buzzer rang. I checked the monitor and saw Serenity stepping out of an old sedan, looking different. No makeup, no designer clothes, just a simple puffer jacket and jeans. I buzzed her in and met her on the porch with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Her eyes were red-rimmed, small and uncertain. Dad said not to come, she said softly. I smiled gently. I figured. I said, but I wanted to see you anyway. We walked to the deck, settling into the warmth of the morning sun. She looked out at the lake, shivering slightly. He said you ruined us, she admitted. I let her words hang for a moment, then said softly, do you believe that she shook her head? No. I saw his face at the gate, Aunt Mila. He was scared. He knew he was lying. We sat quietly for a while. I explained what had happened with William and Tanya carefully, without judgment, just the facts, so she could see the reality her father had hidden. We're living in a 2-bedroom apartment now, she said, tears spilling again. Mom's working at a retail store. Dad, he just sits on the couch. I handed her a mug. If you need a break, a place to focus, or just to get away. You have a guest room. It's quiet, has a view of the sunrise. It's yours for as long as you need. Serenity looked shocked, almost hesitant. But Dad said you hate us. He said we have bad energy. I reached out, brushing a stray hair from her face. I don't hate you, Serenity. I hate the lie. But you're not the lie. You're just a kid who got caught in it. She started to cry then, the kind of sobbing that shakes your whole body. And I pulled her into a hug. It was the first time in 10 years I'd hugged my niece. She stayed for the weekend, then returned for spring break. Slowly, she began to trust me again, to understand that honesty, not appearances, defined the world here. Eventually, Aaron came to. He was angrier, defensive, a little skeptical, but he needed a place to crash. I gave him chores, real, physical work that grounded him, that reminded him of responsibility and accomplishment. He chopped wood, helped fix the deck, carried water, and gradually, he too began to see the value of effort, of integrity, of a life built on reality rather than appearances. We talked, worked, and laughed, slowly building trust. It was tentative, careful, but genuine. William and Tanya were absent from this new world. I never reconciled with them. Their narrative, their greed, and their obsession with appearances left no room for forgiveness. They would tell anyone who would listen that I had stolen from them or sabotaged their business. But it didn't bother me anymore. Their words carried no weight here. I sat on the deck on quiet evenings, watching the sun dip behind the peaks, painting the sky in shades of violet, gold, and rose. The air was crisp, pure, untainted by manipulation or false expectations. My phone was silent, and in that silence, I understood the depth of the lesson I had been living. Good energy, peace, and contentment cannot be manufactured or bought. They cannot be staged for social media likes or retreats. They are cultivated in honesty, in integrity, and in the quiet act of living your truth. William wanted a retreat for people with good energy. He wanted a place where the vibes were high and the world couldn't touch him. And he was right about one thing: this place is special. But he was wrong about the source. Good energy isn't something you can buy, manifest, or fake with filters. It's the peace that comes when there's nothing to hide, when honesty guides your actions, and when you cultivate a life rooted in truth rather than performance. As I sip my wine and watch the empty, beautiful horizon, I whisper to the wind, a small, private smile tugging at my lips. Sorry, William. Strictly high vibes here. The area was more than an estate. It was a sanctuary, a lesson, and a home. For the first time in years, I felt fully, unapologetically myself. The kids were beginning to learn that honesty matters more than appearances, that effort matters more than entitlement, and that peace is earned, not given. And for me, the winter, the solitude, the trials, and the careful rebuilding had created a life worth every moment of struggle, a life worth protecting, a life where truth, integrity, and quiet empowerment were the only currencies that mattered. In the Arai, surrounded by mountains, forests, and clear skies, I finally found the peace I had been seeking for so long. Sitting on the deck of the Arai, watching the sun set over the mountains, I finally feel at peace. Independence, honesty, and integrity, they're not just words. They're a way of life. It's been a journey of patience, strategy, and quiet triumph, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. If this story resonated, consider liking and subscribing for more real-life tales of resilience, growth, and unexpected victories. There's a lot more to learn from life when you choose truth over appearances.